somewhere out west, where all roads end, water and wind yet hold dominion over some quiet reaches of untrodden earth. These gems of open space, grown more and more rare over the centuries, are the result of nature's conspiracy to create. They are, in fact, artscapes beyond all imagining. Outside the ability of a camera or word to convey, they are places that must be seen to be known, and once known, will never loose their grip over heart and mind. They will draw you back, as long as you live, to the wild places of the earth. In the opening months of the new millennium, a concept crystallized for a land conservation system for the 21st century. A system that would, at its onset, gather more than 26 million acres into what may be this century's greatest conservation legacy. They are the lands of the National Landscape Conservation System. These lands are remnants of a wilder West, one that helped forge the character of a nation. They are remote reaches of rugged landscapes that reveal untold stories of forgotten peoples, places of supreme solitude in a world saturated with phones and Facebook, car horns and stereos, jet planes and jackhammers. These lands help safeguard the continuation of the longest mammal migration in the continental United States. They shelter the fawning of mule deer on flowering meadows and the sleepy winter dens of black bear. They are the staging grounds for the dramatic recovery of the California condor and the elephant seal, back from the brink of extinction.
The creation of the system really began with the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. Prior to that time, monuments had always been transferred into the National Park Service. But at this point we decided that it really was time to establish a conservation mission within the Bureau of Land Management. As more units were added across the years, including wilderness areas and scenic rivers, it increasingly became pretty clear that this really should be a permanent conservation institution within the Bureau of Land Management.
The National Conservation Lands define a new land ethic for the 21st century.
The best description would be, we really don't want to change anything. What we want to do is preserve the essence of the wide open traditional western spaces and the traditional ranching, hunting, fishing uses that have been made of that land.
The conservation system creates a model where protection of important landscapes goes hand in hand with protecting traditional uses of the land from increasing pressure for development.
There's a place for development. It's just not necessarily this place, and this place is much better suited as a conservation area that allows the public to come out and use it. And if you just allow yourself to sit back and think what this place was like, 100 years ago, 130 years ago, and that it's maintained over the years, still being a cattle ranch, to me, because it's my industry, is really cool.
I think what's unique about the National Landscape Conservation System is it, unlike any of the other systems, it's part of life as it was, life as it is. They're working landscapes. You still have grazing, you still have wide open spaces. It's really the leftover of the Wild Wild West.
With this new land ethic, we have the opportunity to experience not just a unique feature of the land, but the landscape as a whole, as it relates to wild creatures, human cultures, and the forces of nature itself. For Agua Fria National Monument in Arizona, rather than setting aside remnant ruins of native cultures, the conservation land system protects an entire landscape full of secrets of an ancient civilization.
Places like Gashakatui, incredibly beautiful and majestic places we believe are gifts to us by the Creator to maintain and nurture our soul and spirit. And so it compels all of us to fulfill a sacred trust in the stewardship of these very special places. All across America, places like Gashikatui represent the heart and soul of our connection to Mother Earth.
There's always been a sense that there would always be open space in the West, that there was so much land that there would never come a time when you'd really have to make any decisions about permanent protection. But that's all changing rapidly as the West urbanizes. You get these huge, sprawling urban centers, a vastly increasing population, industrial base, and all of a sudden people are starting to look around them, particularly in the big urban areas, and say, the open spaces, if they're not disappearing, at least they're shrinking into the distance. And now is the time to begin looking at what it is we want in the next century, say 100 years from now.
Conservation of these lands came as an answer to important questions posed by the current reality in the United States. With more people and less open space, how do we maintain the open landscapes of the nation for generations to come? Could the National Landscape Conservation System provide a bridge into and between landscapes, cultures, and time for the benefit of humans and wild creatures of all kinds?
One of the things that we've learned over the last several years in studying the impacts of climate change is that habitats are actually moving. Animals and plant species both are moving north-south, upslope, downslope, and being able to manage for corridors that allow that kind of migration to occur, absolutely critical.
More than 225 plants and animals listed as threatened or endangered make their homes on lands managed by the Bureau of Land Management. The conservation mandate of the National Landscape Conservation System will help provide a safety net for wildlife seeking migration pathways and new habitat as climate change alters the landscape. These national conservation lands also provide a doorway for exploration of the Earth, its history, and our own history upon it. They set aside places like the Mormon Pioneer and Oregon National Historic Trails, which retrace the footsteps of thousands of Americans who long ago sought a new life in the West.
They're important in terms of perpetuating the memory, perpetuating our history and our understanding of who we are as a people, where we came from, how the values that evolved were formed based on our interrelationship that we have with the land.
And with millions of archaeological sites under the care of the Bureau of Land Management, protection of these important places is critical. These lands hold a wealth beyond measure. They are simultaneously a storehouse for the Earth's record of all that once lived, a haven for the descendants of the past, and a cradle for all the Earth has yet to create. In 2004, 54 million people visited Bureau of Land Management lands. The Bureau rarely develops roads and visitor centers within conservation lands. Instead, the door is open for local communities to create gateways to these special places. In the decade that has passed since the founding of the National Landscape Conservation System, much has been accomplished. Almost 2 million acres have been added to the system, bringing the total to nearly 28 million acres. In all, 886 areas have been designated a part of this land system, along with almost 8,500 miles of rivers and trails, an immense accomplishment for such a short time. But it is the next decade that will determine how the grand vision of the National Landscape Conservation System will take shape.
Well, I think the key for us is understanding, the opportunities that we have today to leave a very positive legacy for future generations. We have been given the privilege of managing these public assets. Those of us who work for the Bureau of Land Management do not take that responsibility lightly. We understand that these units of the National Landscape Conservation System represent the very best of these public lands.
The decisions we make now will determine the future of the deer as well as the hunter, the cutthroat trout and the angler, the child on its first exploration into wildlands, and the solitary hiker greeting the dawn on a mountain ridgeline. For the future of the landscape holds the future of us all. We simply need that wild country available to us, even if we never do more than drive to its edge and look in. For it can be a means of reassuring ourselves of our sanity as creatures, a part of the geography of hope.